So thank you today for joining our webinar about ductless mini-split heat pumps, and more emphasis on if you're looking to add cooling to your home and what solutions there are for that. Today we're going to talk about cold climate heat pump technology, mini splits.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, is that, you know?
Strategies.
Dave's like, that's what I'm talking about.
We'll have some cost comparisons and tips on getting good heat pump system for your home, some pitfalls to avoid, and then some best practices. We'll also let you know about local rebates, incentives, and educational sources that are available so that you know who to turn to help you through this process. Our sponsors today include everybody there at the bottom that you see the logos of, Love Electric, the Climate Action Collaborative here in Eagle County, the Colorado Energy Office, CORE, the Community Office for Resource Efficiency, Energy Smart Colorado, Garfield Clean Energy, which is also CLEAR, Walking Mountain Science Center, Sustainability, and Holy Cross Energy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Weiner with Holy Cross Energy to introduce Dave. But first, just a couple of housekeeping things. We want you to ask questions, so please ask questions. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom. That's the best way. We'll try to answer those as Dave's talking if possible, or we'll just let him know what those questions are at the end. There will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. We're also keeping an eye on the chat, so feel free to put those questions in either place. And here's Mary Weiner with Holy Cross Energy.
Hi, everybody. Can you do the next slide for me, Nikki, please?
Okay.
So, or Dave, who's in control? Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody. I'm Mary Weiner with Holy Cross. I hopefully have talked to many of you. So I actually administer the energy efficiency and the electrification program. And that's what we're kind of talking about today, the trends toward electricity. So thank you guys in the chat. Some really good questions about, hey, I have an evaporative cooler, which is a really efficient way of cooling too, but how can I get the mini split? And then a lot of us have a boiler system, so we'll talk about that. But I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, all the way from Boulder, Colorado, really sitting in his home, which gotta love Zoom, is David Petroy. I'm not going to go over this slide. He's got more degrees than I do, so I'm quite impressed. But it's more like he really has done a lot of research on heat pumps and the trend. And he really is going to share a lot of great information. And so, Dave, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Mary. All right. So Nikki went through the agenda. I'm not going to spend time on that. I got about 24 slides. If I speak as fast as YouTube on 2X, I could get through it in like 15 minutes, but it's going to take about a half hour, but we'll have a lot of time for questions and specific, if you got specific home issues or things you want to talk about, put them in the chat, please. So we're going to start pretty basic. We'll say, what is a heat pump for those of you who don't know? And I think the trick is you got to think of heat pumps as moving heat and energy, not temperature. And so the cold air contains plenty of heat. Minus 10 degrees, there's lots of heat, believe it or not. Minus 460 Fahrenheit, no heat. So what is a heat pump? It's basically a two-way air conditioner. I think of an air conditioner as a car that can just go in reverse, and heat pump can go both ways. So this is a brief little diagram, and this would be the unit in the outdoor. It would look just like an air conditioner. Well, let's start at the bottom. So you've got this cold refrigerant, which is well below zero, coming in to that outdoor unit. The fan's running, the coils are there. Air's blowing by it, and the refrigerant absorbs the heat. Now, refrigerants are very special liquids in that they love to absorb heat and give up heat and change phases. If you put a refrigerant on a stove and turned it on, it will boil very rapidly. So refrigerant absorbing the heat, it comes out of that, and it's still in the outdoor unit, but it goes into a compressor because we need this gas to be about 110 degrees to warm your house. And out of here in the winter, it might be colder, in the fall and the spring warmer. So we got to compress it, and compressing it heats it up. So now you've got a nice warm gas. This is all going on outside. This comes into the inside, and inside you have a unit which is either going to be just, it looks like a furnace, but it might not have the combustion part. It's got the coil just like an air conditioner. The air blows by it. blows by the warm coils, and it goes out to heat your house. Now, in a mini split system, each of these is an individual unit on a wall or in the ceiling. So you have multiple ones of these units happening. So it blows out. Now, the one thing you got to know about heat pumps is the air is going to be mid to upper 90s. So if it's a ducted system or you put your hand by the units, it's not going to feel super warm like a furnace. However, realize we only going to try to get the room to 72. So in the 90s is plenty. Comes down out of this, it's cooler now, and it goes outside, and in there's an expansion valve. And when you expand this gas, it cools off very rapidly into a liquid, gets very cold, goes outside, absorbs more heat again. So it's just a cycle. Air conditioning is just the reverse of this in the summer. So it's a very established, simple technology. But what I want to spend time, I want to emphasize today, we're really talking an evolution of different technology. There's classic heat pumps. They've been around since the 1950s, and they really weren't made to make manufacturers or designed to work in cold temperatures below 32. They weren't really appropriate for Colorado climates. We're talking about cold climate heat pumps. And it started around the early part of the century. I'm calling it the birth of cold climate heat pumps. Really in Europe and Japan, prices of energy are higher, so they started working on them. But it was really in early 2000s in the US where there started to be more emphasis. New England had some price increases in heating oil. And everyone that works on heat pumps knows they're saying, well, there's no reason that heat pumps can't work in cold climates. There's no fundamental issue. So they started to work on all aspects of the units. They looked at the compressors and they made them work better. They looked at the fans. They looked at the coils. They looked at the refrigerants. And they also said, we got to make sure these defrost and don't ice up when it's cold. So all these big improvements. And one of the main ones recently, well, in the last 10 years is two things. One is the ability, electronic control, where the compressor on the outside, which is generating the heat, and the fan on the inside, and the rate at which the refrigerant moves are all coordinated. So if it's mild, if it's the fall, and you don't need a lot of heat in your house, just enough, everything runs low, saves energy. If it's really cold, everything runs high. They're well matched. That represents about 20% of the improvement. When I talk about compressors, that was the other big thing. Compressors used to just be on, off, on, off. Now they're very well controlled, and they're basically infinitely controlled. And so this is thousands of these cold climate heat pumps been installed throughout the US and Canada, all regions and around the world. And this is our climate zones. We're talking up here in the high country, climate zones 6 and 7. They'll work fine there. They're adapted for all climate zones in Colorado. So from now on, when I talk about heat pumps, I'm talking about cold climate. And that's what you need to think about and get. Sometimes this is a little bit of surprise to folks, especially in the high country. This is the annual heating throughout a year. And people think that we use most of our heating energy when it's really cold. At the bottom is minus 20 degrees up to 70 degrees outdoor temperature. And this is the percentage of the annual heating. And notice the bulk of it, even here, happens between 20 and 35 degrees. 1/3 of it is where the old classic, above freezing. That's not very much. But cold climate heat pumps can take all of this heating. They can heat way down into here. They start to tail off in here, but basically with a little bit of built-in electrical supplemental, no problem for cold climate heat pumps. And the mini splits actually have ability to heat below 10 degrees. So for those of you who are not intimately familiar with heating and cooling and HVAC geeks like myself, let's talk about a few things. Just tons is not this dude. It's heating and cooling tons. So 1 ton is amount of heat, 12,000 BTUs per hour. Most homes, 3 to 6 tons. And you'll see in a slide, a couple slides from now, I have a range of BTUs per hour. SEER, I think most everyone knows it's a rate of cooling. The higher the SEER, the better the air conditioner is. That's what we think about it. Currently, equipment's 15 to 24. Higher the number, 24 is half the energy of 12. This is a big important thing for heat pumps. It's called heating season performance factor. And it's a measure of how effective a heat pump, or pretty much any unit, can heat a house over a winter. And a higher number, the better. And I'll show specifics of that in a couple slides. The last thing is a good way to compare different technologies called coefficient of performance. And it says, if you set a piece of equipment under certain conditions, how well does it do it? Furnaces and boilers are a COP of 0.8 to 9.5. 0.95 would be a 95% efficient furnace. An electric strip heat, a COP of 1. Air source heat pumps are an average of 3. They vary throughout the year. And this is important. COP of 2 uses half the energy of 1. So 3 uses only 1/3 the energy of these other devices. That's why, because we're moving energy, heat, and it's easy to do that. So all this work, what does it gain us? Well, this is the excess of heating season performance factor, and higher number, the better. And this is from around 2012 to 2020. And it's great because the technology is improving rapidly. Every couple of years, the manufacturers improve something critical. So it's gone from 8.2 up to the best is around 13 now. Well, most manufacturers, and this is the thing, what's readily available? Well, very efficient units in the 10 to 11 range are readily available. Most of the manufacturers have a couple of series that are available there, 2 or 3. There are some available here, but there's really not much an advantage if you're going to go with a heat pump to get something that's not very efficient. And notice 30% improvement. What does this mean? It means operating costs to heat your house have dropped that much over the last few years just by the improvements of the technology. 2 other things that happened. One was the defrosting. I'm not going to go into the details, but basically they have defrost cycles to keep them from freezing up. This is how much heating capacity or heating energy when it's really cold. Again, at the bottom, outdoor temperature from 0 to 60. This is the heating, this is the capacity or the load. So 65,000. This is a house. So a house, a model home, 5-ton, basically, this is how much heat it needs as it gets colder. Now notice with the heat pumps, and this is a little smaller heat pump, but 4 tons. So around 2010 or 2012, let's say the old classic heat pumps, when they really wouldn't work very well below freezing much at all, and they have no capacity. Well, over the past decade of 10, 15 years, every iteration, more and more capacity to heat at these very cold temperatures. And right now we're sort of in this light green range where you're going to have systems between here, and a lot of the mini splits are really up in here, the cold climate ones, where they hold capacity all the way out to about 5 degrees before they slightly tail off. The ducted ones maybe are a little bit lower. So that's the second really key advancement. Now let's focus on mini splits for a minute. So mini splits or ductless. So you have one outdoor unit and it connects via refrigerant lines to multiple indoor units, up to 4 of them. And each of these individually is controlled by a controller with its own thermostat. The beauty of this is the flexibility, because you don't need a lot of space to run this. There's actually 2 refrigerant lines, a power line, and a condensator. So you need very little space relative to, say, other things like ducting, for example. And you can go up to 4 indoor units. Now, with commercial, you can go up to 8, but pretty much for residential, 4 off of one outdoor unit is pretty much maxes out the capacity. The other thing is these things are incredibly quiet, between 20 and 30 dB. And so what rustling leaves, whispering, mosquitoes, maybe I shouldn't use that as an analogy. People don't think fondly of mosquitoes, but you know, I've slept in bedrooms with these and you can barely hear them on low. So the other beauty is you've got all this flexibility to fit what you need to do in your house. So you've seen these are the classic wall units. And you've got units that can go along the wall. They call them floor units. and then ceiling cassette units. So these are sort of the three standards that started. The beauty is they all have different air filtering, and some have 2 levels of air filters. They can all be changed from the front, the filters, so it's very easy to maintain them. And a remote control. These 2 units here are really good for middle floors. So you've got a 2nd floor and your main floor and your basement, because you can put them on the wall and just through the wall, and you can access and go run the pipes and the power on a conduit outside and direct out to the outdoor unit. So it's very easy to get these installed in an existing home. This one is great for 2nd floors where you have attic space or other space above. Maybe you've got a bedroom with a false ceiling or something. You can put these in. The nice thing about these is capacity is a little bigger, and they've got great like airflow. You can really set the way this airflow. So some really good options. But now you have even more. In the last few years, they've come out with these slim duct units. These are only 7 to 9 inches in thickness. And the beauty of this is you can put them upstairs, and you can get a couple of adjacent rooms off of one of these units. So that, for example, let's say I have a 2nd floor. I've got a master bedroom. I've got 2 other rooms, and I want to heat all of them. Well, you can add 3 units, but the more units you add, the higher the cost. With this thing, you can put it above, and you can duct 2 bedrooms off it. Or sometimes if there's a closet with a drop space between the bedrooms, you can do it that way. So these give a lot of flexibility, and the small size makes them great for a wide variety of situations. And just recently, maybe, I don't know, some of the folks on from manufacturers might correct me, but I've just noticed this probably in the last 2 or 3 years. Some of the manufacturers now have sort of a fully ducted air handler available. So now you can get 3 or 4 rooms, but it's not dedicated to one outdoor unit. You can still have this and maybe one of the other units to do a separate room totally. So you can put this in the basement or the attic. If you have a whole radiant house, you could put it under the few rooms in the main floor, and a little duct system and cool them. And also you can optimize duct systems for a new home. So these provide another level of flexibility to do multiple rooms. So there's a lot of benefits to looking at mini splits, and a real reason that these things globally are sort of becoming really established is, in a lot of places, is the go-to strategy. You get cooling this summer, but I think what people don't appreciate, especially if you've got radiant floors or radiant in-floor, that it might be a little tricky during the transition season. So if we look at this graph, basically in our climate between April and June and in the fall, we have crazy daily fluctuations, crazy weekly duct fluctuations. Radiant, it takes a little longer response curve. This is great for heat pump time. The heat pumps can respond really quickly. They're super energy efficient and a lot of comfort in that. So really you can run these heat pumps 3/4 of the year and then just save your radiant for the colder times. Now there's a big reduction in emissions. Like I said, 3 to 1 on energy. I'll show you how you can save a lot on heating with propane. Natural gas, not so much. Natural gases are still a bit lower, but I look at it as insurance. If you've got 2 kind of heatings, one with the heat pumps, one with your radiant, if prices go up or down, you can basically decide how much of your heating you want to do with either one. And finally, you've got healthier indoor air. I talked a bit about the filtering, but if you want to reduce the gas in your homes and combustion, it helps on the health, because I think the big difference now is, especially in newer construction and better homes, they're very tight. So there's not a lot of air in and out, and especially with the weather the last and the fires the last couple of years. So now I'm going to talk in the next couple slides about strategies and thought processes when you're thinking about your home. But these are 3 general things you want to think about. So you want to minimize or optimize the number of indoor units to meet your objectives. So the indoor units add cost each time, maybe It depends. Let's say $5,000 is kind of a number you can think about. And so if you can get a couple rooms off one, or it doesn't have to be perfect, that helps. Now, I did have this originally as minimized, but I'll tell you, I put optimize in because don't underdo it. Like if you're talking to your contractor and you think, oh, well, I can put this wall unit and it'll do these 2 rooms, and the contractor's like, the airflow is not going to quite get it. So don't overdo this thinking, but it's worth thinking about. Minimize the length of all these runs from the outdoor unit to the indoor unit to the extent you can. You know, you're going to really think about the best places indoor, but the outdoor unit, I'll talk about placing that towards the end of the talk. And you want to simplify how to handle a constant condensate. So, you know, the contractor, basically you just want, that's the summer condensate. You want to just get it down, get it out, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So really your priority determines the best strategy. I know in the chat, some people said, I'm thinking about cooling, but the heat pump give all these other benefits. So you're really going to have potentially 2 strategies, maybe 3. So if one might be cooling and increased comfort, the other savings on your heating bill if it's propane, or emissions reduction, or you might combine these. But I'm sort of saying, what's your primary? So let's say it's number 2. You say, you know, I'm on propane, I want to save a lot of emissions, or I'm on gas and I really kind of want to reduce my emissions. The strategy, it would be to look at your house and say, what are the biggest rooms I can do with this heat pump system? You know, and I care about cooling in those rooms. And can I get these with a couple of indoor units? And this is if you're, you know, concerned about the budget. If you have more budget, then obviously you can look at doing bigger portions of your house. But the concept here is, what's the biggest volume of house I can get to really save on the heating and the emissions reduction? If cooling, you know, those rooms is appropriate. If you're looking for cooling and comfort, I'm going to make a little assumption here, but it might be other rooms, that you're looking at bedrooms and you're looking at second floor or main floor. So ideas are, you're looking at the second floor and you call the HVAC guy in, and you have, let's say you have 3 rooms. You got your master bedroom, you got your 2 kids' rooms or 2 other rooms. You might get the 2 bedrooms from that slim ducted unit above, and then you can do a ceiling cassette in the master bedroom. This way, each area has really good temperature control. Or if you have a master and an office and a couple other rooms, you might go with 2 slim ducted units for the 4 bedrooms. Or you can go with 4 wall units. But this is just knowing all the different options is what's important. You can really discuss with your contractor what's the benefits of each strategy. If you got a whole bedroom ring on the main floor, you potentially could use these new air handlers and put it in the basement and run a small duct system and hit 3 or 4 rooms off of that one unit. Or you could put a couple slim ducted systems under, hang them at the top of your basement. So I think the main thing here is just knowing these different strategies, give it some thought and brainstorm with your contractor. So we're going to add mini splits. We've got a radiant home. And just so people know, in the next couple seminars, we'll talk about electric homes, and we'll talk about ducted homes. But today we're talking about sort of adding mini splits to radiant. Electric it might apply to. But I got a propane boiler. Remember I said the COPs 3 to 1. So it does use about 1/3 of the energy, and you're going to save 40 to 60% on the areas you choose to heat with a heat pump. And the amount of savings depends on how much of the heat pump you use. Now I'm talking about, you know, use the heat pump for the summer and those shoulder seasons, and just reserve the radiant for when it's the coldest. And I'm going to show you an example. So let's say an example. I got my home, and I'm just going to, and my motivation, my house is pretty nice thermally. My motivation is to do most of the main floor. And let's say it's the main floor that faces south. So I'll be psyched about the cooling. So I got 3 tons of heating at 0. I'm going to switch the heating to the radiant in the winter. I'm going to put a couple of indoor units in. Well, what would that look like? If I'm heating that area with a boiler, that 3-ton area, it's going to cost about $2,800 a year. And here's my price. I picked up like the very close last winter's propane price, Holy Cross Electric, and natural gas. Here's my gas. Of course, gas is a lot less expensive. Here's the big savings in the heat pump. This is with the propane boiler. Notice I've saved $1,351. I've saved a lot. Now, if I put the heat pump in a house where I'm using the heat pump for most of the year, and then I'm using the radiant in the winter, it's a little bit more. Gas is as everybody knows, we've been fortunate up to now that gas has been an inexpensive way to heat our homes. We're learning it's probably not the best strategy at this point, but it's a little bit more. But you're going to get big emission savings, and I will show you that on an upcoming slide. So you have you're thinking, well, I want to add some cooling. Well, the old way, all you would have would be the option. I'm going to put an air conditioner. I'm going to put some ducting in. And let's say it was for this main floor, depending on the cost, ducting could vary a lot, but $15,000 to $20,000, probably in a smaller area, is not a bad thing. And remember, prices in Colorado installed very wildly. All I'm trying to do is give you relative costs in the ballpark so you can really compare them. Cold climate mini split with a couple of indoor units, it might cost about $20,000. But the beauty is with Holy Cross, you get 850 ton per rebate. You've got to use it. You've got to commit to using the heat pump in the summer and those shoulder seasons for much of your heating to get the rebate. And then also local energy organizations like Walking Mountains, you should check around. There's quite substantial rebates in some cases. So you're basically getting, you can get anywhere from $2,500 to almost $5,000 off the system. So for those of you that emissions and air quality and stuff matters, this will give you an idea of what you have to gain by thinking about getting a heat pump in and really help using it to its potential. These bars are 2020. And this is the amount of CO2 emissions per year from a house that's about 2,400 square feet in the mountains. And what this 2020 is the electrical grid is 40% renewable. So you can see here, electric resistance even is the highest. I've got a heat pump with electrical, propane, I've got gas furnace, or I've got my hybrid system. So I want you to focus on these here. This would be a gas boiler system. All right, propane's a little higher, but gas or propane. And this over here would be, I'm adding a mini split to my house, which is radiant. I'm going to use the mini split for those areas a lot. What happens? Well, 2027, Holy Cross's goal is 2030, all renewable. 2027 would be 80%, and 75 to 80% over the next several years, sometime between 27 and 2030. Almost all the big utilities in Colorado are committing to that, and they can achieve it with the technologies. It's not an issue. It's going to happen. Well, what happens to your emissions? Well, if I'm on gas, I'm going to go and it just decreases a little because it uses a little electric to run the furnace. But notice my system, I'm using a lot of the heat pump. This will be for a whole house, but whatever section of the house you're going, I'm dropping it to about half. And this is a big drop because this is what a car, if you replaced your standard gas car with electric car, this is about how much savings, and you're talking spending $35,000 and up. So we're talking about big improvement. So this is one of the big benefits for those of you that it's important. The other thing I want to mention is part of this talk is additions and remodels. There's a lot of this going on, and in the past, it was pretty much, okay, do I expand my existing system? What do I do? Now with these mini splits, hopefully you see, you've got lots of options. I could put a ceiling cassette up here. I could put, a little wall unit in here. I can easily set outdoor units around. So often that's going to be a lower cost than expanding your current system, especially if you have to upsize a boiler or a furnace. Sometimes you've got to extend your distribution system. You might have to rework lines. You've got to add pumps. You've got to add a lot. You know, you've got cooling automatically in it. And here's another big thing to think about. It really, when you size it and put it for this, you're making sure it's going to be really comfortable for that. Often, if you choose to extend your existing system and maybe not upsize, you could potentially run the risk of having not so comfortable, maybe in the end you have to replace it. So I think the main point here is you should definitely make sure you get a mini split solution as an option to consider when you're doing this. So let's go through here real quickly. So a key thing is acquiring a good heat pump system. So I'm going to talk a bit about some stuff so you should have some grounding of knowledge when you talk to folks and we're thinking about this. So I call these avoidable heat pump errors. And you'll be out and I talk, you know, I sort of live, eat, and breathe heat pumps. So talk to a lot of people about them. And this is what some things happen. People say, well, gosh, well, it's not heating my house when it's 20 out. It's just cold. Well, in the end, when you talk to folks, here's things you want to avoid. Number one, it used to be, wasn't a cold climate heat pump. I would say that's not really the case much. This is a big case. It's too small. Like those curves I showed you, when it's getting cold out, and in the past, the heat pump would tail off, someone wouldn't look at that enough and say, oh, I need a bigger unit. And with mini splits, you have to do two things. You not only have to look at the outdoor unit, make sure it's big enough, but you need to look at the indoor unit. So if you say, well, I'm going to do the living room and the family room, this great room, you got to make sure you got a big enough indoor unit that's going to do the job. And the other thing is the line sets that run the refrigerant back and forth to the outdoor unit. You know, if they're not installed right, if they're really long, they're not insulated well, they're in unconditioned or semi-conditioned spaces, realize you can lose 10, 15% of the heating energy. Well, that's significant. You don't want to have that happen. The other thing we get is heat pump heating costs are more than expected. And typically the sizing was not really right. That's one of the things where, again, it was too small. What happens is if they're using, and this might not be the case in these situations, but, and it might be, let's say you're on propane, you have radiant, you have to use the propane more. Somebody said, well, the heat pump's going to take you down to through 3 seasons, November will be fine. And all of a sudden in September, you're like, heat pump's not doing it for me. I got to turn my radiant propane on. So you're using more of these expensive fuels than you expected. The other one happens is the control settings are incorrect. And this is kind of in a singular unit often, but they set that, you can set the temperatures where the heat pump goes down to a certain outdoor temperature, then it switches over. And so if you've got a heat pump where it's going with electric or propane, you're setting it up, and this doesn't necessarily apply in this talk, but what happens is that the controls weren't set right. The heat pump was supposed to heat down to 10 degrees or 5 degrees, and it's really only heating to 25. Fortunately, this is a very easy thing to fix. Another thing, folks, is sometimes, not often, occasionally, some folks will look at their electric bill, realize a lot higher, and they'll forget, or they just won't think, well, I only got propane delivery once this year, not twice. So these are very avoidable things. The big thing, though, is really selecting a good contractor. And contractors are super busy now. The good ones are really busy. But, you know, talk to local resources and friends. At the end, Mary or Nikki's going to go through the resources, and everyone up here really can very much help on who's doing lots of mini splits. Look at their websites. I think this is an interesting thing. If you look at the websites and they don't mention mini splits at all, really have to wonder about it. Now, keeping up websites isn't the top of a lot of people's priorities, but at least say, okay, I need to go deeper and talk to them. They install a lot of these heat pumps. A recommendation on quotes. I used to be in this business a long time. Get a couple quotes, because don't get 10 quotes or 5 quotes. If you think about, I'm talking about, if you want a good system, you're asking these folks to do a little bit more. They're going to have to do more design. I'll talk about it 2 slides. They're going to have to think about it more. You're going to have to do a little more planning, a little more in it. So you want a great job. So if the quotes are close, then they're probably good. Don't get a third. If they're really low, I would be a little leery. And you can go on and find mini splits, almost giving them away online. Not apples to apples. I'd be very cautious of that, because you have no support. You're buying it online. Contractors aren't going to be too psyched to support that. Realize when you buy it now, you've got a big pyramid of support. And this is a 15-year purchase with compressors, with control boards, with everything. So just a word of caution. So I talked about errors, and here's how you avoid number 1. Manual J, manual J, manual J. It's a strategy. They build a little quick model in the computer, says this is how much the house needs. You got to make sure that they put the model in and they say, well, how much heat do I need? Up here, it's like -6 is design. You got to make sure they take account of the altitude. And you got to look at the indoor units. And if you're doing an addition, remember if you're doing an addition or some add-on above a garage, you got to make sure the units, the mini splits, can go all the way to really cold, and they can go to -13. So here's just a quick example. This is the same thing you saw before, outdoor temperature load. Green is what that house needs. I could put in, someone could come and go, oh man, I'll just throw this heat pump in and be like, well, this whole triangle here, that's how much I would have to make up with something else, like my radiant propane. Something. Now, if you've got radiant gas, you might say, that's not good enough. But I'd say, no, if you're going to go this route, you want to get a heat pump system that can do it when it's really cold. You don't know in the future whether you want to spend and upgrade your boiler. You might get happy enough and say, oh, the heat pump's awesome. Or you might, for other reasons, decide to use the heat pump more. So this would be a good match, either here or here. I only have a little bit, the heat pump here, I'd only do a little bit of backup electrical or very little with something else. So these are good size matches here. This one, not adequate. You got to make sure you're getting a cold climate heat pump, not just for it to work, but for many of the rebates. And just, I'm not going to go through this. They're going to send out the deck. This just talks about them, what the criteria is. Make sure, ask your contractor 5 times you have to. If you want to know how noisy or quiet, ask for the dBs and find out the warranty. Indoor, a couple things. Remember I said to each of these units, you're going to send 2 refrigerant lines, power, and a condensate line. So that's what you got to think about. Condensate lines, it's water, no kinks or snags, appropriate pumps. If it's up in the attic, unconditioned spaces, all the stuff's got to be well insulated. Are the water traps for uninsulated? You can actually ask your contractor. When I did this a long time ago, certain homes, we would put water sensors in just as a second level insurance, like a space thing. Okay. So there's a little note if something's amiss. Try to keep the refrigerant lines to a minimum. I already sort of addressed that. Outdoors, unless you want to go shovel your heat pump out in the winter, there's a few suggestions. You want to cover it, and you want to make it above the height of the average snow depth of the maximum month. So you'll see out there, a lot of people say, oh, 12 inches is fine, 12 inches is fine. Not up in your part. Rifle, maybe so. It doesn't snow so much. Vale, definitely not. This is a good mounting system. You just have to be thoughtful. Make sure they put vibration isolation in. Couple other things, you want to put them not, they're going to run year round, even though the outdoor units are a lot quieter. I'm not going to put it near my bedroom or my patio. And avoid the west wind. The sun helps it defrost. The southeast corner is a good corner put in. And you got to have effective heat, drain pan, and drain to a safe location. Ask the installer for pictures of their location installations. You know, if I'm going to see this, that's not bad. I'm going to see this, that's not bad. I would imagine they're not going to send you these pictures, but summary. Mini split, they work great. Cold climates, you know, you're going to get comfort. They are fantastic devices. They work year round, but in this case where we're talking about supplementing, you know, radiant, you want to keep your radiant for the dead of winter. A lot of energy savings emissions. I would really encourage you, remodels and additions, to really consider this as you know, a primary strategy. We talked a bit about thinking about your design. You know, what's your goals? Know some of the basic information on design and installation. Talk to the contractor, consider them your teammate. You know, I mean, I think you get a good contractor who's really doing mini split heat pumps, really likes it. You know, they're super knowledgeable. They're going to really work with you on options. And there's great contacts up here. Everyone, Mary, Nikki, everyone's working like crazy. The knowledge base up here is fantastic. So on the next slide, they're going to talk about that. If anybody wants to email me about specific things, I'll be happy to address questions. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. That was great. We have a few questions that have come in, but just a reminder to add your questions to the Q&A or to the chat, and we will get to as many as we can. And we can always email you after the webinar if we don't get to your question. So your local resources for heat pump incentives and educational info, resources, contractor lists, all that kind of stuff are all listed here. And the areas they serve is also listed. So the 3 nonprofits that have partnered for this webinar that can give you resources are Walking Mountain Science Center in Avon, CORE for Pitkin County, and Garfield Clean Energy for the Garfield and Glenwood Springs area, and then Holy Cross Energy, of course. So refer back to this page for contact information, and we'll go to the next page. Dave and Mary can talk specifically about Holy Cross Energy incentives.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. So we do have some really great questions. So I'll go really quickly. This might be a little confusing. So if you actually are doing fuel switching, which means you have natural gas or propane, and you're going to use this, whether it's a mini split or a ducted heat pump system, will give you $850 per ton. If you already have electric baseboard, it's $600 per ton, but just know you're going to, and that's our next workshop, you're going to save at least 30 to 50% on your bill. We also would really encourage you at the time, if you are thinking about getting rid of all your gas or propane, is there are heat pump water heaters. Same kind of concept as a heat pump. And if you are going to switch from a propane or natural gas heat pump water heater, it's $1,450, which actually pays for the tank. And then again, if you already have an electric water heater, the rebate is $450. We also encourage you, especially if you're doing a remodel of your kitchen, don't put back in a gas stove. Think about those induction cooktops. There's studies that show that if you have children in your house with a gas stove, they have 42% more asthma, is what they're finding in children in homes with natural gas stoves. So a lot about indoor air quality studies now. Another reason to get rid of your gas.
Yeah, lots of good reasons to get rid of your gas. Heating systems, water heating, gas stoves, all kinds of safety issues that it eliminates for sure. Next slide, Dave. So
just if anyone wants to know about heat pump water heaters, you can put questions in the chat. I can touch on them in the question and answer.
And both Nikki and I know that it's the same thing, heat pump. Okay.
So loveelectric.org is a website that was recently released, and it's really focused on Colorado and helping folks find resources and education for heat pumps and switching their homes to all electric, as well as qualified installers and incentives all around the state of Colorado. So we encourage you to check out loveelectric.org. This page is a great reference for this kind of things you can find there. You will find the incentives from Walking Mountains, Holy Cross Energy, CORE, Garfield Clean Energy, and all your local entities. So check it out, or just ask us and we can direct you as well. Next page, Mary, do you want to go to our first question and I'll talk about the webinars? These are the next 2 webinars coming up for everyone. September 7th is really based on if you have electric baseboard heating and what it's like to upgrade that to a ductless mini split heat pump. And then September 14th is for switching homes with ducted furnace systems to a heat pump system to use your existing ducting. And there's a link there that you can reference later to sign up for those webinars. And we will send out all these slides as well as a link to the recording after the webinar. Go ahead with our first question, Mary.
So a really good question, since we are getting into shoulder season and we know how the temperature can plummet. So heat pumps, how quickly do they go from heating to cooling mode?
Oh, the changeover?
Yeah.
Really fast. I mean, there's not like a delay or something. You know, I mean, it would be in a minute or so. I mean, there's no real delay.
Yeah. So there's something that you all need to be aware of, that you can't heat in one room and cool in another room. So you can't have one room on heat mode and one on cooling mode. So it's either heating mode or cooling mode. They don't heat and cool simultaneously. So, but they will change over from heating to cooling, but just know that each room needs to be on the same mode. A next question are, what are the numbers, costs, and emissions for all heat pump systems rather than hybrid? So a mini split used for all heating and cooling in our climate zone. So basically an all electric one.
I want to go back. Let me go back here.
So Dave, you might not have those in front of you, but I know you've probably done those calculations somewhere. So you can always email those out after the webinar as well.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if people are
and what I can say is what I'm
I'll show you
seeing
this
with the
here.
yeah,
so
you had it.
This is right here. So this gives you all right. So this might be for a whole house. So this would be for all heat pump system rather than hybrid. Okay, so if you look at, here's a cold climate heat pump, this dark blue to the left at 40%. But now note, so this is a whole house heat pump only, integrated electrical into the indoor unit. It's mostly 90% is the heat pump. You only rely on the electrical as an assist, really cold. So notice how it would drop in emissions way down. So in the end, it would actually be the lowest emission option ultimately. So that gives, I think, an idea. Well, the cost, Brian, I think maybe if you elaborate more, maybe send an email after or something with a little more details about the specific house size, et cetera. We can give you more an idea of the cost, because quite honestly, it would just depend on that. So
So I can kind of go over the cost just very, very quickly, you guys. So if you're doing like an ADU above the garage, you know, pretty small, 1.5 ton, 2 ton heat pump, you're looking at, you know, $8,000 to $10,000. If you're going to do your whole house, 24,000 since 2,400. Yeah, we do have some 24,000 square foot house, but an average size house, you're going to be looking at the $20,000 to $30,000. And what the contractors are doing now, instead of the hybrid system, is putting in like a 10 kilowatt, so 10,000 watt electric resistant backup. So if it does really get cold, you would always have that heating.
Yeah, a little more detail, because you know, you could go mini split, you could go duct, you can go there's a different strategy. So send send later a little more detail. We can give you some better information.
And then Nikki, you're on mute.
So another question for you, Dave. So how much skill is required for a do-it-yourself heat pump mini split? There are many manufacturers out there encouraging this in videos with detailed manuals, saying that charging the refrigerant isn't that complicated. Would you recommend somebody do this themselves or find a contractor, or do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I would not recommend do it yourself. Charging the refrigerant is not trivial. The other thing is the nuances of setting these systems up. And sometimes you've got to do dip switches in the control board and everything. Now, you know, if you're an engineer and a super geek about all this? Potentially, but I would be very cautious of that. The other thing is you got to be really careful about running your condensate, making sure if it's where you need to pump the pump, make sure the lines aren't kinked, etc. Making sure you don't have joints. So, if it's the only way you can get it done and you feel you're at a super high skill level, really high, then no. But I mean, my answer really is I wouldn't do it.
And the issue is if you're having problems with it, most contractors aren't going to touch something that you installed. They just don't want to, what I've heard is I don't want to clean up somebody else's mess. So, I will warn you, be very careful with do it yourself, like Mr. Cool, Pioneer. What I'm hearing from the manufacturers, you get what you pay for. So, and you have to make sure you hit the requirements that we require for the cold climate heat pumps. So,
Dave, what kind of electrical upgrades might be needed for a mini split heat pump?
It depends on how many appliances you have. So think of the unit might be, it's similar to say an air conditioner. So if you do a big portion of the house, you might need like a 30 or 40 amp 220. But if you don't have many other, well, yeah, so you might need to do that. Now most homes can handle a heat pump. If you do a heat pump water heater, if you go all electric, you're probably going to have to upgrade your panel.
So it depends on what amperage. Most homes in Holy Cross territory might be about 100 amps. New homes are now like 200 amps. So sometimes you might have to add 25 amps. It's just a matter of what your panel is, the age of your house, and what that panel is. But I've seen anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000 worth of electrical upgrade.
And so if you're, I'll just make this suggestion. If you're in a house with gas or even propane and you want to do this, but if you go all electric, it's going to require an upgrade. For instance, my house, I'm all electric except for my dryer, which uses hardly any gas at all. And the reason I do that is I don't have to upgrade my panel. So I stop short of that. So you can sort of think about that and then do it and then save money and then eventually upgrade your panel. But like Mary says, it depends on the age of the house. If it's 100 amp, you're probably going to have to upgrade. If it's more than 100 amp, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah. And then we have one really good question on financing. So, and we do have, I think, Nikki, in the resources, but there is a Colorado program with the state called Renew, RENU. And so that's one option. Some local like Elevation Credit Union, some of these credit unions offer home improvements, carbon reduction, kind of loans, that type of thing. So there is some really good financing out there.
Yeah, C-PACE is another one. So there's some.
Yeah, C-PACE is commercial, you guys. Yeah. So it's the Renew is for homeowners. And then another. Go ahead, Nikki.
I will add that there's several mortgage options out there if anybody's refinancing or purchasing a home as well. That will roll your improvements into your mortgage.
And sometimes the manufacturer's financing is pretty good. It just depends on, but sometimes you can get a really good deal from the manufacturer.
Yeah. So there's a question: do existing ducting? Do you need existing ducting for the slim duct units?
No. Those slim units, you're not going to duct them very far. You're going to just have a little bit of ducting. I would say you think of those in terms of adjacent rooms. So, you might have a unit hung and then you might have 5 to 10 feet of ducting into one room or the other. So you don't need existing ducting to do those.
Dave, can you elaborate a little more in detail on the condensate drain? Preferred location? Is it a pathway for cold air, bugs? How do you hide them?
Okay. So you normally, let's just talk about the simple one, like the wall units. You're going to go through the wall. You're going to have it all in a conduit. Everything's going to be in a conduit. The refrigerant lines are going to be insulated in that. The conduits, the drain line is going to be in it, and it's going to come out. And then, you know, you can put a little like a block for bugs and stuff at the bottom. You know, like a little wire mesh or something. Not much. I mean, it's not a big
no.
hole. It's not like a lot of things are going to go.
It's not like a swamp cooler. Yeah, I've seen a lot. Yeah, it's not like a swamp cooler, you guys. So,
you know, it's nothing. I wouldn't be concerned about those issues, but you do want to make sure that that the installer's done a nice job. There's no kinks. It's straight. It's down. If it's those ceiling units, you know, they have a nice little pump. If it's up in the attic where it's semi, unconditioned, they got to make sure everything's insulated well. So that just takes a little thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is a great question, is how efficient are heat pumps at cooling homes looking to replace a swamp cooler and furnace?
And on the same note, Dave, maybe just this is the same type of question. Oh, I lost my screen. So go ahead and answer that because it just went away. Sorry.
Yeah.
They're really efficient. They're not as efficient as swamp coolers, but I think they're a lot more effective than swamp coolers. And the other thing, I think what you need to think about is in terms of overall energy efficiency, if you're looking at the whole package of heating and cooling and emissions and comfort and everything, you know, if you're going to replace the furnace, the swamp cooler, it depends. You know, you could send us some more details about your home and what you're thinking of doing. You know, with a mini split, you've got everything. You've got air quality, you've got cooling, though not as efficient as a swamp cooler. It's better throughout the house. And then you've got the most energy efficient heating, much more than the furnace. So overall, you know, you're sort of upgrading everything. And, you know, so like I said, if you want to send one of us more specifics about your situation, that's why you have the local folks to help you, and I can help you too.
Yeah, and I can just add to that, sorry, Nikki, that I have definitely, a furnace replacement is really easy with a heat pump. Like we have some contractors, whether it's Mitsubishi or Bosch, and we're agnostic with the manufacturer, is that they put the heat pump, which is that condensing unit outside, and then that air handler. And so you get both heating and cooling with that heat pump. So if your furnace is 30 years old, it's time to replace it. So the heat pump is a really easy. It's a matter of making sure your ductwork isn't leaky. So there might be some air sealing, you know, some duct work that needs to be done, and make sure that ductwork is the right size for the heat pump. And our own Rocky Mountain Institute, they go by RMI now, just put out why heat pumps are the answer to heat waves. So I just put that link into the chat that shows how efficient heat pumps are for cooling. So
and also, Lauren, the seminar in a couple of weeks is going to be specifically talk about that.
Mm-hmm. For furnace.
That's the one in 2 weeks. So we're going to talk about specifically ducted systems, heat pumps, and you'll get some more details on that too.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave's going to put up that page with the webinars that are coming up on it. And I would encourage any of you that have more questions, please email them to any of us with the information you've been given. We will follow up with the deck of slides and with the recordings. You can always reply to that email too, and we can connect you with Dave, or we can connect you with your local energy organization. So does Dave and Mary, do you want to stay on a couple more minutes and answer some more questions?
Yeah. Sure, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, yes.
So we'll stay on, you know, and try to answer as many questions as we can. So Patrick, yes. I don't know why. Patrick, what do you mean by swamp cooler and mini split? Are you asking what the difference is? I know you know the difference. So I'm not sure.
Maybe asking if you should have both. Is that what you're asking, Patrick?
Yeah.
I mean,
the lights. Compatibility. Oh.
No, they don't. No. They don't play.
Yeah,
together.
they don't. Yeah.
They're totally separate things.
Yeah. They're two different beasts.
I mean, you could look at, if you have a swamp cool, it works well for your second floor, and then you want to go main floor mini splits, heating and cooling, you know, stuff like that. Yeah.
So one more question for you. They joined the presentation late, but it's being recorded. Is there an opportunity for me to go back and review the presentation in its entirety at a later date? Yes. Yeah. We will send out the recording and the slides. May not be today, but soon, within the next couple of days, you'll get a follow-up email. And any more questions? What did we miss? Somebody said they just need to know who they can talk to get $20,000 or $30,000. I understand.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have. Mary, do you see any more in there?
No, I mean, you guys, our contact information, all that I would say, we're sending out even a postcard about, you know, whether with Holy Cross in our territory, whether you have questions, you know, about solar or energy efficiency, electrification, just give Holy Cross or Walking Mountains, just give us a call. We're your trusted source before you sign on the dotted line. We do have a list of contractors. There's some really good ones out there that do know how to do heat pumps, the air to water heat pumps. Like I have a boiler system. We don't have anybody in our territory who is really knowledgeable in installing them. So give us some time to get going with that. That's why these ductless mini splits, because we all are looking for cooling now, are a good interim for cooling your home with a boiler system. And then you got the shoulder season heat too. And what I'm finding is people love the heat pumps so much they're using them year round a lot.
I think we need to clarify just a little bit more for Patrick. He says, should I consider replacing my swamp cooler with a mini split? I think we said yes, because of the overall benefits and outcomes of that. But Dave, can you explain that one more time?
I think it depends on your motivation. Like if you just, so if you're just unhappy with your swamp cooler, or like it's not cooling enough of your house, you want to do different areas, everything, then yeah, if you want to cooling and then save energy and all the other benefits of the mini splits, yes. But so it depends what you're trying to accomplish. I guess it's not the best answer, but
so I think Patrick, because Patrick, I think the best thing is just to take this offline and contact Dave directly. His email will be on the slide deck and all that. I mean, we know that swamp coolers, evaporative coolers work really well in our dry climate. They don't filter though, and you actually have to have a window open for them to work properly. So the heat pumps, the trend with electrification and with cooling and these heat waves and the smoke is all about the heat pumps. And now that we know, and I will say in Holy Cross territory, we have over 300 cold climate heat pumps installed. So I know they work in our territory. So please feel free to contact myself or Nikki, and we can definitely guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, and Patrick, if you want to email Dave more specifics about your home, he might be able to give you some better advice.
And David Slavin has 20,000 calories per day, impressive. So I'm not, maybe.
Yeah, that's a bear. That's a bear, not me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'd be as big as a bear if I did that, but bears eat 20,000 calories a day right now because they're getting ready.
I was like, what is that question?
Yeah, no, we were talking about all the bear scat on the Rio Grande, how they're feeding frenzy on the Rio Grande. So be careful, like I do, ride the Rio Grande every day. So they're out there.
I think that's an excellent note to end our recording. So we're going to end the recording now.